got it.
Good morning, Thomas.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
Good.
Good. Great. I couldn't do much. Well, I did nothing, in fact, because I've just got back from holiday, a very long holiday indeed.
I think that's common. Yeah.
Okay.
I was on vacation for a week around the time that we would have met last time.
Okay. Okay. Now for me it was 3 weeks, solid 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty normal for parts of Europe, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not for my English colleagues, but the rest of Europe, yeah, Southern Europe is in August is just, a month that you can take, well, easily. That doesn't, because we seem to be all synchronized on this. Then, but then the problem is that when your colleagues are, in other regions, then the assumptions are different. So I've come back from holiday and got a backlog that was horrible. So I'm just crawling through the
Makes sense. Well,
emails.
we'll see how many people we actually get today. So.
Well, there are votes, right? So we need people.
Yeah, I hope.
Okay.
Hi, Jethro.
Hello.
Hi.
I feel like it's been ages since their last meeting.
Yeah. Trying to guess whether they're going to get quorum today. If we have to start votes and finish them on the list or something. So we'll see. Morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
Morning.
welcome everyone who's just joining. We'll wait another minute or two since I still see the participants list changing every little bit. And of course, we hope other people would join us to help us get quorum. I think we might be one short of quorum right now. And we'll start in another minute or two once the participants list doesn't change for a minute. I haven't seen it change, but I think we are still one short from quorum. So we'll give it one more minute and we're going to start at 5 after. Okay, it's 5 after. Let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully, well, at least one other voting member will join us here. So welcome to the TAC meeting. Seems like forever since we've actually talked to each other. And I see a special returning guest. We have Stefano here. Welcome back, Stefano.
Yeah, great to be here.
And I know people saw, I think Stephen sent a note about Stefano's new role. So I guess you are a special guest star, but congratulations on the new role.
Yes, I'll likely be continuing to join as a guest. I'm working with RISC-V to get them to join the Confidential Computing Consortium. And so I'll likely come as their rep.
That would be wonderful.
Wheels are in motion.
All right, keep it up. All right. I think I recognize all the names here, but just as our usual reminder, we try to make this be a good experience for everybody who comes. Everybody is welcome. Every project meeting our criteria is welcome. And we try to make this be a good experience. This is covered by the usual Linux Foundation antitrust policy. And since I recognize all the names, I trust that you are all familiar with this. So this is the agenda unchanged from the draft email that I sent out 2 days ago. And so I will attempt to cover things in this particular order unless there's any requests for changes. Although 1 or 2 things like approval of minutes, if we don't have quorum, then I may have to defer that one to a later point on the agenda. So the approval of minutes, I may move that one down, but otherwise probably proceed in that order unless there's any requests for changes. Number 7, Dan is not going to be here, but he said it was good to discuss that anyway. So I'm prepared to lead the discussion on his item on number 7. We will have, assuming we can get quorum, we do have a couple things for votes, not to mention, the minutes. And so if we can do the votes, and we'll do that. Oh, I see Ben joining us. Maybe we'll be able to get quorum. We'll see. All right, so let's just check to see how much quorum we have here. So I do not see Accenture. I do not see Ant. I do see ARM. Thomas is here. Facebook, I do not see. Google, is anybody able to represent Google on the call here? Huawei, I do see Howard. Intel,
Yep.
I'm hoping. What's that? Yes, okay. I'm hoping
yes.
Simon will make it. I'm here from Microsoft and Lily is here from Red Hat. So I count 4 unless either Intel or Google joins us. Or any of the others. Did I count right? Am I correct? Nobody from Google, Intel, Ant, Accenture for Facebook. Okay,
Alex,
sounds like,
I'll keep an eye on it.
okay. As soon as we get quorum at the end of a slide, we can transition back if we get one more that joins us. All right, so I'm going to skip this one. I'm going to skip this one. And we'll go into action item review since we have a bunch of people on the call that had action items. And so let's just run down from the top. And I know some of you have kind of reported out over email or whatever, but let me give you a chance for any discussion now. So Stefano, do you want to summarize point 1 for us? I saw you put this in email. Stefano is muted. Can you hear me, Stefano? Stefano seems to be temporarily muted. Okay, let me put the whole stuff out of order. Point number 2, I think none of those people are on the call right now. So I will go on. Stefano, speak up if you get audio again. Point number 4, Ava is on the call. Ava did do point number 4 and did get a response back that they are willing to present. And so the proposal is next TAC meeting. We'll have a presentation about Kata containers. And so then I think we can mark item number 4 as done. So thank you, Ava, for that contact. I don't see Stephen on the call. Ashley, point number 6.
Still in progress here as we establish the vulnerability assessment team.
Okay.
And on the next one too. And that's in done, but I think it's also considered in progress, just updating it. I checked the FAQ after each TAC meeting. So it's currently completely up to date, but I'll continue to consider this one in progress on my end as updates are made.
Okay, since there's no natural conclusion to this one as phrased, if you're already in the habit of doing it, can we just remove it from the action item list?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Ben is here. I don't remember what this one was other than what the words are. Do you remember what this one was, Ben? Great.
Yeah, I need to find the market. I'll find that during the meeting here. I'm sorry, and then I'll post it.
Okay, so that one's in progress then. All right. Number 9, also for all the project mentors, most of which are not on the call. I do have this in progress for the Open Enclave project. I've filed a GitHub issue so that this is on the agenda for the next time that the Community Governance Committee, which is the internal oversight body that sets the policies and things, so that it will be on their next meeting. So that one is in progress for Open Enclave, and we hope that the other projects will be similarly, but we will get it. It's on the agenda later today to say to what extent do we actually have official recommendations, and so that's one of the things we hope to get to a vote in the near future. So Dan is not here, can't make it today. Identify the training recommendations, so I'm going to leave that one as still in progress unless anyone knows otherwise. Ashley, you have 11 and 12.
Yes, for 11, we ran out of time on the outreach meeting, so I'll send an email to coordinate this one, and then we'll meet again in 2 weeks' time. For the white paper, I see Tomas is on the call. You can coordinate directly with me, and we will submit a ticket to our web engineering team to update that document. So if the suggested change is available, we can work together to get that update ready.
So we actually have two Thomases on the call, so I'm thinking we should keep, always put an initial after Thomas.
This is, I believe this is Thomas F.
Okay.
So
Thank
I'll
God.
So
All
I'll
right.
follow up with him via email.
All right, point 13, which Thomas was this one?
I'm
It's
pretty
F.
sure Thomas F.
I nominate the other Thomas.
Thanks, Thomas.
Plausible deniability. It's always the other Thomas. Got it.
That's how it works.
Okay, I've
right.
updated that in minutes.
All right, GitHub issue 79. That's the white paper feedback one, if I remember right. I don't remember if I got the numbers confused. They're on the agenda later. 79, is that white paper feedback or is that DNI? Let me just check here. 79, oh, that's the common terminology one. Yeah, okay, that one is on the agenda later. So which Thomas was that one? And I think you've already done it.
F.
Yeah. Okay, Thomas Harjono, you're off the hook for today. That means you get the next action item. How's that?
So which one? Hang on, which number are we at? Sorry, I walked away. 13?
Okay, and
No, this
number
all
15
okay.
is- okay, and number 15 is now done, right, Ashley?
Eric, I see you're on the call. I've sent the GitHub invitation a couple times, and each time I resend it, it looks like it still hasn't been accepted. Were you able to see the invitation on your end?
Yes, in fact, I never actually saw the invitation, but I'm able to see the repository. So I replied to you a few minutes ago saying I can see the repository even without the invite.
Okay, I'll try to add you again. I thought that's what happened, but when I tried to add you as an assignee to the issue, your name still wasn't coming up. So I'll check again right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the GitHub invitation emails sometimes just don't work. So the best thing is just to send the invite and then send a separate email. Right? And if you go to the organization page, you can still accept the invite even if you didn't get the email.
Oh, okay. So Eric, you've officially accepted then.
Awesome.
Well, just because you can see it doesn't mean that you have permissions to be assigned to issues and things. And so
Well, that's good
anybody
for
can
me.
see it because it's public.
I'll work the issues either way.
Okay. All right, Stefano, have you got audio back?
Hey,
Yes, I
hey
do.
Dave.
Sorry.
Oh, quick, Dave, number 8. I just put the link in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
And I don't know if this is appropriate yet, but I have on behalf of the Anarchs Project and Nick from the Anarchs Project, I have an item to pull up whenever you're ready for new items.
Okay. Do you have any time constraints or can we put it down under any other business?
Any other business would be fine.
Okay. All right. Let's mark that there so we don't forget here. What do you say? Okay. Got it. All right. So back to Stefano. You want to report on points 1 and 3, since I think you put those in email, but you want to.
Yep. Yeah, sure. Just a brief overview. So for number 1, it is completely doable. It does come with a price tag that seems a little silly for 1 or 2 white papers, only in the fact that I think other projects would be interested in this. So like I said in the email, I wouldn't recommend doing it just for CCC. I would connect with other groups like CNCF or LF Networking or LF Edge. And certainly we can facilitate that, Ashley, myself, and eventually Brian Warner. And I would work with them and have the Linux Foundation get an account. Evidently, they used to have one many years ago, but not enough projects used it. And so they just got rid of it. That's something that if other projects were interested in getting DOI numbers for their white papers and their other publications, it would be beneficial to everyone, I believe. It just needs a group of people to sort of organize it. And so I would recommend that. In terms of number 3, a little bit more complex of an answer because it is a topic that has been discussed. We do have a lot of documentation in terms of internal resources. So stuff that the PMs can use to work better within the communities at the Linux Foundation. But I think it would be a good effort to look into. And as I mentioned in the email, it's a little bit more of a board of directors type or a governing board type task. So we might want to move it over to them. Because in terms of a simple yes or no question, the answer is no. There are no current documentation resources from the Linux Foundation. Training.linuxfoundation.org is the big sort of push in terms of diversity inclusion. So I would recommend we take this to the governing board and add it as a possible discussion topic, perhaps to the face-to-face, just to discuss whether or not diversity and inclusion documentation is something that we feel we should give as an action item to the Linux Foundation in general, and then work with other projects to see that that happens.
I would support that recommendation, since I think this topic is not limited to the TAC, meaning it affects, say outreach, which has white papers just as much as us. So I agree. I love the idea of passing the buck up to the board, so it's their problem.
Yeah, excellent. I'll work with Mr. Wally and we'll make this a topic for discussion.
Sounds good. And then we can remove this from our list of action items and add it to Stephen's. So
excellent.
All right.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Ava.
There is work under the banner of the LF in the Inclusive Naming Initiative, INI, that might have some resources available for style guides, writing guides, terminology usage, things like that. So I know there's work in progress there. I don't know if it's done yet, but there might be some resources that are useful.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. So a couple of other people join us, but I think we still don't have quorum, correct? I don't think we had another voting member join us. So speak up if you're a voting member that joined us, but I think I recognize all the names, and we have lots of our other members, but not voting members, but thank you all for being here. All right, just hitting the highlighted points here on this one. Graphene went through the name change. I think our website, which has under projects, I think it shows the old name now, so I think that needs to be updated.
I'll take the action item there, because we're going through some website updates now.
Okay, I have not seen a vote start on Occlum, but I pinged Stephen before the call, and he was getting on a plane, and so that's why he's not here right now, I think.
He did indeed message me to get to
Okay,
follow up with this.
Right,
so there's two things I'd mention. First off, Occlum is finished. I got the official word from legal.
Yeah, from the IP assigned one. Yeah.
Yeah. So so we will be sending out the vote. I would recommend we wait, just for the sake of people being on vacation, till September. If we send out 2 votes, September 1st, one for Occlum and one for Graymine, I think we'll seem that we're acting in a bit more of a responsible manner than if we send them out in August, right at the end, just as people.
So are you saying, is Grammine done with their IP assignment?
Yeah, sorry, that was my next.
Okay, sorry.
next section. They have, I skipped ahead. So yes, we've, in the name change, we wanted to update the technical charter for Grammine. They had 2 requests. After much discussion with legal, we sort of got to a conclusion and summarized their requests in the technical charter. So their technical charter has been updated. Everyone agrees it's a good one. And so we are officially moving forward with that one as well.
So then I think it would be appropriate if, especially if you're going to wait until the next board meeting, then it would be appropriate if we would, if we could invite Grammine to give a board presentation. Since you can see all the other ones that have had a vote have had a presentation to the board, but they haven't had that opportunity yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mona's currently on leave. I think it's, I don't think she's on sabbatical. I think she's just on vacation.
Just a 2-week vacation.
Okay, it's 2-week vacation. Good. So I would recommend not at the face-to-face, because that I'm guessing Mona will return to Intel with a rather large full plate and probably not have time for a presentation. We can ping Don and ask if he's interested, but I would imagine Don likely won't be at Open Source Summit. So yeah, that's certainly something we could start moving forward with Graymine and Occlum to get them queued up for perhaps the next virtual board meetings. So that would be October and November, respectively. And that would get them in before the end of the year.
And Stefano, can you correct me on the naming? Because I don't think it's Grammine. Is it Grammine?
It is Grammine, as in graham cracker. And yes, I say it wrong too much and need to adjust my pronunciation.
I got
That
used
is the
to
correct
saying that
spelling?
here.
That is the correct spelling, yes, but it is pronounced Grameen.
Okay. Okay, and so Ashley, do you or somebody else have the action item to update the website that still says graphene?
That's me. I took it.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right. And I think we have CCC attestation report on the thing later, but let me ask this now. Actually, let's cover this when we get to the thing from outreach, because there's already a bullet point on a slide for that. So let's keep going. All right, unless there's any other things to bring up that's updates on projects, other than attestation, which we have a vote on later. Let's keep going. All right, let's go to full screen because this one is a small slide. All right, well, I had two displays here. Let's swap that. Oh, okay. Hopefully people can see that better now. All right, so Linux Plumbers Conference is the week before Open Source Summit. This one is fully virtual. And you'll see that there is a confidential computing microconference that is associated. It says call for papers ends TBD. I did reach out and ping Jörg on Tuesday, but I have not gotten a response asking him, so, what's the status? So one of the questions is, do we know, are there actually people in the CCC, are there projects? Is there anybody that actually is participating in this, that is submitting this? And if not, would we like to encourage folks? So anybody here on the call know anything more about people participating in the Linux Plumbers Conference, microconference? I will take silence as either news to me or not that I know of. So let's try to advertise this to our projects. Now, of course, this one is specific to Linux, especially Linux kernel related issues. But this is something that's still good to advertise to all of our projects. Okay, any other questions on this? Because basically all the information that's known is what's in the slide. You can get to the call for papers and stuff, which basically has the same information in it. So, and I will let you know if I hear back from Jörg on what the status is. All right, so hearing no comments, I will keep moving to the next one. The week after that is Open Source Summit, hybrid, both in Seattle and virtual. And so one question I have is, are we going to have many tech people present, or are most people going to be virtual? So we do currently have a room where we'll be hosting the virtual meeting with anybody who's there in person. And so let me just ask, out of those on the call, who here will be there in person as opposed to virtual?
Me.
I might be.
Sorry, I heard Ava say I might be, but I didn't hear who was before that. Somebody spoke up before.
I said, and Thomas F.
Okay,
I'm
Thomas
not
F.
gonna
You'll
be
be
there.
there in person. Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
You will
gonna-
not. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's speak up if anybody else is going to be there in person. If you think you will be in Seattle during the tech meeting that particular week, speak up, please. So we can get a real small room if we're going to have a very small number of people. So.
Many of us still can't travel, so I mean.
Yeah, I
that's the
understand.
problem.
Yeah, especially with some of the lockdown or some of the restrictions increasing in some places. So I understand. Okay, I'll put the same query on the list, but it sounds like we can get away with a pretty small room. So does anybody know if there are presentations from any of the projects, whether the presentations can be virtual, right? But are any of our projects participating? Like, Lily is NARC's doing anything this time? Any of our other projects presenting anything at OSSNA?
I don't know, and I'm actually sort of out of the loop right now on NARC stuff. Ben might be a better person to ask.
Well, it's Ben. Any ideas?
I honestly I forgot. I believe there is, but I think there's a question on travel. I think Nathaniel is expected to make it since he's in country, and Mike is trying to get access to travel.
Yeah, but this is NARC's hosting a session, even if that session is virtual. Do you happen to know?
They have a session. I believe it's a live session.
Okay. I know NR's
just
been
trying to-
having one at pretty much all the other open source summits, and so I would expect that to continue if somebody can do it. So
Yeah, I'm just trying to look it up. I'll check it. I'll confirm in chat.
okay. Yeah, and I don't know if there's anything from Open Enclave this time, which has had stuff at about half of them. Have you heard anything, Ava? I'm the mentor, but I've not seen any discussion about having anything this time. So
I haven't heard one or the other.
okay, all right. I can ping them, but yeah, it's unfortunate. Most of our mentors are not on the call. I think only 2 projects have mentors on the call between Open Enclave and CCC attestation. So. All right, so Ava, you want to talk about the bottom half of the slide, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's sort of an open-ended question. Given the amount of work that I've been seeing happening in several spaces around guest from host isolation in the kernel, I'm curious if others feel that it would be worthwhile for the CCC to rally people around that and describe the threat model, describe the security model, question. Like what would we put in there? And the sort of incentive, the motive behind this, I think, is try to bring the disparate conversations and work that's happening, some in Kata containers, some in Linux, some in different hypervisor spaces, some at lower levels than that, bring it all together in one place, or at least make a point of coordination among those discussions and take a stance on it if there is one to be had. I don't know what that stance would be, but it feels like something that the consortium might have.
So you saw this was an issue that was filed by Google and I think Dimitri and who's the other one? Was it Tom? I can't remember his first name, Rodel, that came and talked at the TAC meeting about the issues they were running into trying to upstream things because the Linux kernel maintainers were not convinced that this was a threat model that the Linux kernel cared about. And so this issue was filed saying, hey, we Google don't think that this is an issue that's specific to Google. We think everybody in the CCC should have this same opinion and problem, right? We need to apply pressure together. And so they filed this to say, how do we in the CCC coordinate efforts to give kind of a united front to get the Linux kernel community to agree that this notion of protecting the guest from the host is an important threat model to accept patches to address. And since things like the Linux Plumbers Conference, the Open Source Summit are things that have, Linux kernel presence and tracks and stuff, then this question was, how do we best coordinate? How do we best do that to start getting these things addressed in Linux? So.
And the other side of this that I think
would be to submit patches and CC Linux Cocoa and then see what happens.
So another part of this that I think some of the members on this call will want to consider is how to build confidence not in Linux kernel, but in proprietary hypervisors, cloud hypervisors from commercial vendors. How do we build confidence from consumers of these that they are in fact confidential?
Well, that's what attestation is for, right?
There's something else, and I was going to bring it up a second ago. Ava, I'd be interested in your opinion. I've had some people pushing back saying, isn't there elements of the trusted code base that are needed for the cloud-based machines in order to do things like reporting, orchestration, whatnot? So I am getting questions for public cloud providers, how do they prove what other elements of their orchestration are actually required or needed, or how do you validate that they're not leaking?
Yep. I'm getting similar questions, and that includes questions like, sure, it's been attested by the cloud provider that it is the right code the cloud provider expects to be there, but how do we know there isn't a something?
No, I don't, maybe you can elaborate exactly what you're trying to protect against, right? But the point of most of these technologies is that the hypervisor is kind of out of scope from the security perspective. So you attest to the container or T or whatever's enclave, right? And then that's sufficient.
Here are the issues that I'm hearing. There are libraries that are used for attesting, and that's fine. You have a third party, perhaps you're testing to, you have to integrate those libraries. Second thing is that some of the public cloud providers will have other parts of their guest Linux, if we're talking about a VM-based thing, that is going to be libraries that are integrated to the trusted code base. So I know at least 2 sources of integrated libraries that have to be trustworthy for whoever integrates them into their VM or container or build. And these are the questions I'm hitting right now.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I think
certainly
those are
anything
good
that's in
questions,
your,
Eric, but Ava mentioned something about hypervisor components, so I would like to understand what was meant by that.
It may be less of a technical question and more of a socialization question, raising awareness of the isolation model, getting into the kernel specifics and how it is protected.
As for
And right then,
I think that the 3 major hypervisors
that
that people, or 4 major hypervisors that people use today are very acutely aware of all the technologies that are being developed and are being integrated.
And I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the people who are coming in. Each one of these problems, whether it's a root problem or a hypervisor problem or a library problem, will all be hit at the same time as people are digesting this. So being able to break down the issues and articulate them is why when I saw this issue, I thought that maybe they should be addressed as a whole to talk about what all the elements of the TCB are and how to articulate them in a way where we can sort of break down the threat models and the responses in a digestible manner.
I wonder if that's, and Ava, the bottom point, do we need a technical white paper on this topic? I think that was for your question, which sounds like, Eric, you have some thoughts on what that white paper would say, is how I'm interpreting your comment.
Yeah, and that's why I was trying to get from just host to guest, but it's instead from a developer and implementer and employer point of view.
You like to get some more insight on the actual components that make up the TCB, if I understand correctly.
Well, and some principles around them, right? Because, I could say that everything that's in your TCB is in one of 2 categories, right? Either you don't know exactly what it does, and so the author is in your inherent set of trust, right? Or it's open source and you've been able to get confidence independent of who the author is, right? And so even if it was, a Microsoft or Google or AWS or whatever it is for, hypervisor client, component or whatever, if it's open source, I don't have to trust the author because I can vet it myself, or I can get a security analyst to vet it for me or whatever. And so it can be in my TCB without putting the author organization into the TCB. Otherwise, I have to pull the author organization into the TCB, and it's topics like that that are principles that we could articulate, I think.
Exactly. When I'm offered a hypervisor choice of guest VMs, I can't just use my own because it has to be agreed to by the cloud provider.
Yep.
Why should I trust their cloud provided OS?
Right. Not again, the 2 possible answers are either because you trust them and therefore they're inside your TCB of your trust relationships, or they're not in your TCB and you're trusting the component for reasons independent of who the author is, right? It's gone through the appropriate security vetting. So yeah.
And just to close that out, if you choose a confidential compute to protect yourself from the public cloud provider, why should you trust the public cloud provider provided machine?
Right.
Sorry, but why would the cloud provider be providing the VM? Isn't the whole point of cloud providers to offer you the VM abstraction and you can bring your own?
It seems to not. I mean, there are tools. I think to Eric's point, there are tools and libraries inside the guest image that interact with components, including attestation, not necessarily just attestation.
Exactly.
That may be opaque to the consumer.
Yeah, so here, this whole notion about the coordinated presence in the kernel track was when Linux is the guest, then you have to enlighten the Linux components to be able to talk to the hypervisor of choice, whether it's KVM or whatever else, right? So some of those patches have had resistance to accepting them. Right now, those are of course open source, so you can trust them from a confidential computing perspective, but they still have to get merged, because the point is you have to enlighten the guest the fact that it's running on a VM to light up these features. So I think that's where some of this comes in. Is in some cases you may need, hypervisor specific patches to Linux if the hypervisor requires things that are different from other hypervisors. So, like you can imagine, there's two types of hypervisors, as explained on the Wikipedia page on hypervisors. There's type 1 and type 2, and so you can imagine that the patches for type 1 hypervisors might be different from the patches for type 2 hypervisors.
So if the question is if we're debating this and do we need a technical white paper of the topic, my suggestion, and I wouldn't be the lead author, but I'm happy to provide a lot of text, it would be that yes, and it's not just about host to guest. It's about it's from the perspective of somebody who's implementing what are the trusted code bases for deployment in the public cloud.
Yeah. Or from implementing, you mean implementing the guest OS, or consuming from a cloud provider?
Consuming from a cloud provider, who all do you have to trust as part of the code that you're bringing in?
I like that approach as well.
I mean, if you focus on how you think about the TCB, then although the primary focus may be what happens if your TCB is, say, inside of a VM or something like that, you could scope it such that it's not even specific to VMs. That's just, the prominent case or whatever. And then you can have principles that apply for how do you think about the TCB in general, even when running bare metal.
Yeah. I think it's worth scoping something to the VM case, given the amount of work happening there and the lack of coordination or lack of centralization of that work today. I think it's worth, and maybe it's not the entire white paper, maybe it's, a significant section of it, but calling that out.
And there's a big difference here.
Different.
Yeah, and there's a big difference here from the last paper. With the last thing, when we're talking about confidential X, there's a big difference between confidential VM and confidential process, because VM has these issues a lot worse than the process does.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like, at least from the people that have spoken up, which I'm taking as people with energy to help edit text or do reviews and things. If other people have energy, please speak up. But it sounds like just focusing it just on the VM topic right now is where the energy and potential, I don't know if demand is right, the word is probably need.
Demand and need are both there. I mean, I certainly see people struggling to see which way do they go. Do they port their applications or do they just throw it on top? The natural effort is to throw it on top until you start to say, well, you still have trusted code base issues. And that's the discussion, which is a hard one.
Yep. Okay, so I heard at least one volunteer to help with text. Is there anybody else who feels passionate enough to actually help work on actual text? I know not everybody's in the call, but it would be great to have at least 2 volunteers to help start creating, a skeleton of sections and organize things.
Eric, I can help you.
Thank you, Thomas. I told you were going to
the
get the
silent
next action.
Thomas.
How about we help each other?
All right, thank you, thank you, Thomas H. We did say you were going to get the next action item, so achievement unlocked.
I thought you meant get the coffee. I thought that was the AI.
No, achievement unlocked. We got you your action item. Okay.
And I'm happy to review, but I don't think I'm going to have capacity in the next 4 months or so with conference season coming up.
Yeah,
That would be
that's what I figured.
appreciated. You certainly are on the other side of knowing what to deliver here, so that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, so and of course I'm also happy to review. So at least Ava and I will review. If Eric and Thomas, if you can take the lead on, create a skeleton document with a proposed table of contents, and at least that far, and anything else you're willing to do past that. So.
All right, and I will start this from the base document that we're talking about. So it is a fully dependent document on the terms that we're talking about last year.
Yep.
Okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. And we'll get to that later on the agenda, but that's okay with me. We'll see what others think.
Works for me.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next topic then. Is that okay? Any other comments on this one? I guess let me just close on the question. Is there anything that we collectively need to do, even if it's all virtual, right? Anything we collectively need to do at Open Source Summit and or the Linux Plumbers Conference? Because it would be great if we had people conversant in this topic that were planning to attend any of the kernel track, I think was your point, David.
Yeah, that is, my point is both, we should get folks who are conversant in this in that room so that we can help inform any kernel developers in that conversation. And it'd be great if we had something, even just a GitHub issue or an email and a mailing list to point them at if they ask, hey, that's cool, can I learn more?
Is there any section that you know of that this question might be natural to come up in?
Let me pull up that schedule, unless you have it handy.
I don't have it up handy.
I had it last week, so I can probably find it in about 2 minutes.
Okay, shall I go on and then you're welcome to interrupt if you find it?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, just checking back again. Now I'm switching slides. Do we have quorum yet? Not that I know of. Ashley, confirm.
Oh, just trying to navigate over there. Ooh.
I don't think we have quorum yet.
Yep, not yet.
Okay. All right, updates from the outreach committee. Let's see, I see, I wonder if Ben, you want to give us an update? Who else was in the outreach committee yesterday?
I think only Ashley.
Okay. Then last time there was 2 things that outreach reported on. One was a request for the TAC, which is the fully bullet here. The request for the TAC to provide ideas for upcoming webinars that the outreach could schedule or whatever. And so right now there are 2 that we gave them before. One is to say Verizon is a possibility, and the other one is me giving the update on the IETF RATS architecture. So both of those are offered topics to outreach to schedule. And outreach is looking for other ideas too.
Yeah, is there a contact for each of those in case we're trying to verify that the timing would work?
I'm the contact for the second one.
I'm the contact for the first one. Thomas
sorry,
F.
who is it? Thomas?
Thomas F.
Thomas
Yeah.
F.
Thomas. Okay.
And annotate on my slide here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So ... other ideas for things that would be the TAC and or its projects would like to offer as potential webinar topics should outreach choose to use them. Anybody else have a topic that they think would be useful for the public? As with this one, it doesn't necessarily have to be a topic from the CCC, although I think our policy is that we want the topic to be vendor neutral as opposed to being a vendor presentation. But anything else that's news related to confidential computing, whether it's from another organization, whether TCG or IETF or any other organization that's relevant in this space, could also be governmental related, if there was some US NIST thing or some EU thing or whatever it is. So
well, I mean, there's a lot of potential interest in attestation. So if there is a different view on attestation or a different way we could slice the topic, that would probably be also very, very interesting topic.
Sure. I'll notice that both of these topics here that are on here are all attestation.
Oh, okay.
So I think Thomas F's offer is indeed in that category. So since Verizon is an attestation project that might, who knows, I guess it's up to Thomas, someday be proposed into the CCC, but right now that's been discussed within the CCC attestation SIG, is the existing Verizon project from ARM and folks.
Yep.
Okay. Unless anybody has any other ideas, this is something that we are asked to do, and please keep thinking about this to see if there's any other topics we can think of or that you become aware of that would be good to put on here. and we can have an external speaker come in and present. That's perfectly fine, as long as it's, supporting the mission of the CCC.
And even if you have an idea, but you're not volunteering to be the speaker, that would be fine too, because then we can go and search for a speaker.
In case you know of somebody else that needs an action item, just think of something that's in their ballpark and volunteer them, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it would be nice to have the TCG point of view on the attestation architecture, maybe.
What if we were to volunteer somebody like Hank?
Yeah, exactly. Hank, Ned, Thomas H. I know he will hate me.
I propose the other Thomas.
No.
Other Thomas has already volunteered, so he gets one free pass. So. Okay. So a TCG update or TCG point of view on related to confidential computing, right? But okay. All right, that's a good idea. All right. If I don't hear any other suggestions, the other one is the status of the Everest report. So Ashley, can you summarize what the Everest report status is? No, some of it was an email, but can you give us a summary of what was discussed yesterday?
Yeah, there was, and maybe Ben could provide some more detail. There was a lot of discussion about some of the regional data that was provided in the initial report for feedback. There was a lot of feedback provided from the community. So we spent a majority of the call yesterday going through that. They have extended the date to provide feedback. So the last day will be September 3rd, and then they'll finalize the report by mid-September now.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want any more of a viewpoint of the Everest report status?
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, so without getting into the details, most of the conversation was really a conversation to not critique the report as much as understanding what is meant by certain things. So a good example was services, right? And sorry, Microsoft was the example that was pulled up. So then the question was, okay, so if Microsoft is as a tech company, are they being counted twice by being a consumer and providing a service? Because they do both, right? They consume things for completely internal purposes, but some stuff is consumed purely for providing a service. And so like there was a lot of confusion around how they were counting things, were they double counting things? There was questions about the numbers, not that people were critiquing the numbers, but wanted to understand, did they get the right data to support the right numbers, right? For example, like, Asia was of concern and UK had some data that was, didn't sound right. So there was just kind of going through things, making sure that it is understood and that everything does kind of coalesce into a good story. So I'm really happy with the feedback and all the critique and the conversation. There's still more work to do. So I think we're on track, but there was such much conversation. I don't know. My personal individual opinion is this conversation is going to continue and we might need a little bit more time.
Okay.
That's my concern personally.
All right. Thanks for the report. Very useful.
So the other agenda item that I had was actually a bump from the outreach committee. Do you mind if I were to bring it into this? Okay. So
go ahead.
I'm actually going to cop out, but I'll do a slight introduction. So on the call is a gentleman named Nick Vidal. I hope I pronounced your last name right, Nick. And he is kind of the newest member. He's now the outreach community member for the NRX project. And he had an idea. He brought it up as outreach, and outreach decided it's really two specific requests. So I'll steal a teeny bit of his thunder, but so there is a request from the NRX project to have a intern through a program called Outreachy for the NARCS project. Being the way Nick is and the project is, they're not trying to do it selfishly for NARCS. Obviously, they want to have one, the first item is a request for the NARCS project, but two, they want to provide a request and let it be known to other projects if they want to participate, that they could. And the request is that the CCC provides funding for NARCS is the first one. And the second is they provide funding for other projects and get that benefit. And Nick, do you want to go in and give a little detail about reaching why it's so interesting and so important?
Yes, so thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. I just joined the NARCS project as a community manager, and I talked with Mike of how we can grow the NARCS community, and most importantly, how we can grow the CCC community as well. And the outreach program, I'll share the link here over chat. But this is a very popular program run by the Software Freedom Conservancy, and it has two main goals. One of these goals is to promote diversity, and the other one is to promote open source projects. So it allows to create a program where interns can work on open source projects from all kinds of areas, and NARCS wants to be part of that and wants to participate. And not just us as the NARCS projects, but we feel that other projects from the CCC might also want to participate in that. And we can promote this as a group, as a CCC. And so we're, as Ben mentioned, there's this request. We have to make a decision by September the 10th. That's the deadline for the outreach program. And the outreach committee thought that the TAC was the best place to make that decision and see how to make it happen. And if other projects from the CCC also want to be part of that, and we highly encourage that, please do so, and we will very much appreciate that.
So can you elaborate on the actual funding request? I thought that the funds or the outreach internships are paid for by Outreachy. So is this the request is for us to fund Outreachy?
Yes. So the value is the stipend is $6,000 per intern, and I talked with Steven and Mike, and there seems to be a budget for this if people think this is valuable, and we think it is. Oh yeah, that's the website for outreaching. And we will have to provide those $6,000. And if you scroll down a bit, you can see what are the types of interns that they're looking for. So in the last program, 92% of those were women, 4% were transgender, genderqueer, or non-binary, 64% were people of color, and 12% were from historically disadvantaged case or tribe. And what NARCS specifically is looking for is to help an intern to learn more about confidential computing and help them to build a demo on top of NARCS and to showcase that. And I think that will bring value for the intern, for the NARCS projects, and also for CCC. And if other projects from the CCC would want to be part of that as well, that would be really great, really wonderful.
I still don't really understand the funding request. Does Outreachy only support interns who have for projects that have a corporate sponsor?
Yes, so not corporates, but we as CCC would have to fund that, the 6,000 for intern. Yeah. So that will be the request if you think it's valuable. And the NARCS project will want to be part of that. Does that make sense?
I'm just looking to see the list of
Mhm.
sponsors right now, right? You see a number of member companies of the CCC up
Mhm.
here, Google, Red Hat, Microsoft. And then down here, I do see some foundations like CNCF. Okay.
I mean, it seems a bit weird to me for us to, sponsor outreach for them to then pay for an intern who's going to work on one of our member projects. Why don't we just fund the intern directly?
I think it's the same idea, but the value here is that they would have a whole mechanism to find those interns. So those interns, they're applying, and this is a way for us to find new people who would be interested in working with us. And instead of us seeking those interns, the outreach help us by doing that.
Okay, I see.
And this adds to the whole diversity approach that we
Yeah.
really want to encourage in CCC and for all the projects. They already have everything, as Nick was saying, they already have all the infrastructure set up to do everything from recruitment for people. They already, they know how to reach this target audience probably better than we do, and they all have the infrastructure set up to pay for them, right? Where this might be a different, harder request for the LF possibly. And this is already, as a precedent, this has already been done by the CNCF, as you can see. Which is far more organized and structured than we could ever hope to be.
Oh, we can hope.
We can hope, maybe not hope too hard, even when it's like that.
So did I get it right? You said that the deadline for decision, the drop dead, the last date was September 10. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
The application.
And we. Sorry, what was that?
The application.
Because here, this application date is for interns to apply as opposed to for us to make a decision on funding. Is that correct?
Exactly.
This is a different date. This is for possible interns, not a date for us. The date for us is not on this page. That's the September 10th.
Yes, that's exactly. Yeah,
here it is.
That's exactly the case. Yeah,
right there. So I observe, if I understand right, actually, if you can confirm, our next TAC meeting is scheduled for September 9. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I guess since we don't even have quorum on here, which says more than half of the voting members that would need to vote on this are actually have not even heard about this yet. I think I would propose the next step is to send email and start discussion on the TAC list with this link and the information we've talked about. Get people to discuss and call for the vote on September 9th, because it sounds like if we call for a vote and so by the end of the meeting on the 9th, we'll have made a decision. That sounds like we'll still meet our deadline.
Sounds perfect. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Okay, so let's see, between the two of you, can I ask either Ben or Nick for you to send a piece of email to the TAC to summarize this, summarize what the question is going to be, the link here, and your own thoughts on the matter?
Yes, I have the email here.
Okay,
it's all
excellent.
set.
All right, so Nick, you're going to send it? Excellent. All right, and then I will put this on the agenda for the 9th with a note that there's going to be a vote on the 9th, and then we can decide then.
Yeah,
but
thank you so much.
Right now, we just need to get the information out about what the question is going to be. So,
okay, yeah, thank you so much.
So I had not heard of this. So even though like Microsoft is obviously here, so people with my company have, but I have not heard about this. So thanks, I found this very useful.
Oh, so that was the first. So that's the first part about. I think there's two votes there. So the first part is a request specifically for the NARCS project. The second is the would it be approved as an offer for other projects and whether projects would like to know about it? So that's where the emails gets really is really important,
Okay.
right? That everybody
Mhm.
who's involved or connected to a project asks the project if they would be interested, so we can collect the list of projects for that vote.
So how do you happen to know how it works in other organizations like CNCF or whatever? Do they fund an intern per project? In other words, is the scope of an intern a single project? Or are there cases, do they say you're just an intern for CNCF and here's the set of projects that you can, work on during your internship? Or do they typically only focus on a single project? Because it's my question. So it's really which projects want an intern type of thing. What's the right way to think about this and ask the question?
Yes, so it's per project, in fact. I don't have the actual detail regarding CNCF. I'm not sure if they do this, but I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I guess if as long as we send this out and ask people to, read through this and give your own, anything that you think isn't in here or easily findable that you want to highlight to make sure that people understand, make sure that's in your email. But otherwise, sounds good. Let's get the word out across the rest of the TAC and have a fuller discussion on the 9th.
Wonderful, thanks.
Okay. All right, Ben, are we ready to move on from the outreach discussion then? Or is there anything else that you wanted to highlight on this one?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, cool. All right. So CCC attestation SIG. Let's see, who is on the call that is a chair? Thomas F, I think you're one of the chairs. Is there anybody else that's a chair that's on the call besides Thomas F? I guess that's a question for you, Thomas.
Okay.
Are you the only chair that's on the call, or is there anybody else?
There's Ava, but
Ava just had to drop.
Okay, cool. So yes, it's me.
Okay. You want to give us a brief summary of where the CCC attestation is at, and mention the proposal here?
The proposal for Verizon, you mean?
For frozen of for the change of chair, but anything else?
The change of chair. Okay, yeah. So Eva resigned, and so we need to get a new chair as per charter, and Eva put forward Larry, but we need a vote here. We need a vote in the TAC to actually enable Larry to step up.
Larry has been coming to all the CCC attestation SIG meetings.
Right. Yeah. But yes, if we don't have quorum, then I don't know. This needs to be postponed again, I suppose.
I think
or can we do that by email? I don't know.
We can do it by email, but I think we can actually do a hybrid vote if we want that says those voting members on the call can cast a vote now, and then you don't have to respond on email because you've already voted, and then everybody else has to vote via email if we want to do it that way. So
that would be great. In the sense that so that we unblock this and we don't wait on another 2-week cycle to get the thing done, maybe.
So I know Larry. I can say one or two things about him. Just he's been at CCC attestation SIG meetings, but not in the TAC meetings. And so if people on the TAC haven't been to CCC attestation SIG meetings, they may not know Larry. So Larry's been at Microsoft for a really long time, so longer than me, and I've been there since like 1998. He is in the team that owns the Microsoft Azure attestation service. And so attestation is his day job, the attestation as a service. And he uses confidential computing to implement that. And so he's very conversant in confidential computing topics. And so with Ava stepping down and the goal to have co-chairs from like 5 different organizations, then Larry being from the same organization as Ava is a natural person to step into that one gap because it doesn't cause duplication of companies across the set of co-chairs. So that's why Larry being active in that particular area as his day job, having been present at and attending and participating in the CCC attestation SIG meetings, he seems to be a natural replacement for Ava in that particular context. So that's why Larry is the proposal. So but the charter requires it to be a TAC vote, not an attestation SIG vote. So the attestation SIG does the proposal, and the TAC then approves or disapproves of the chair change. So.
Yeah, so I mean, Larry has been endorsed by Eva, by you. I mean, I don't think there's any problem with, from my side to to cast a positive vote. And so if we want to proceed or whatever you think is better, but yeah.
So let's get a couple of the votes recorded now. So I'm going to vote yes on this one. Let's see, Thomas, you just said you voted yes.
Yeah.
I think Lily, you're the next voting member on the call.
I would vote yes. I have no problem with it.
Okay. And I thought we had a fourth voting member on the call. Actually, who was it? Or did they drop? Who was the fourth voting member? Oh, it was Xiping, Howard from Huawei, and it looks like he's dropped. So I think we're down to only 3 voting members.
Yes.
Okay. Out of the general members, are people generally supportive? I mean, it's not an official vote, but you can sway the votes and stuff. Is there anybody else that has issues with this, or just silences consent? So, in case there's anybody else that knows Larry or whatever. So, all right. So let's record that there was 3 yes votes, and then actually, I guess after the call, maybe I will compose an email that has all of the votes that we need. And because we have up to either 3 or 4, I'm not sure yet how many votes that we'll need, and then we'll put that in email for people to respond to.
Thank you.
All right, anything else you want to chat about from the attestation SIG? Any news from whether Verizon plans to be submitted or anything?
Well, I'm the only one available at the moment. So my colleagues are still on holiday, so I cannot. But yes, the plan is that, and I have no reason to drop from the original thing. The other thing is that on Tuesday we're going to have a nice demo from Eric, I suppose, on trusted path routing during the meeting. So you're all kindly invited to join.
And when is that? Is that the
Tuesday 31st, I think? Yeah.
31st, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Yeah. 5 p.m. BST.
Yeah, 5 p.m. BST.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
All right.
Yes. Looking forward for it.
Yeah. Thanks, Thomas. And Eric, looking forward to it. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next topic here. So this is Dan, who couldn't be here, but did his action item and has stuff ready for a vote, we think. And so we will find out shortly. So this would be, I said, either 3 or 4 votes. And so this is the one that may or may not be ready for a vote. My hope is it will be, but we don't know yet, in case people have things they want changed here. So Dan took a shot before, we've had the diversity and inclusion topic, and we had some things that we said, should these be recommendations or resources or whatever? And so Dan took a shot at putting up a pull request here. And you can see I have some minor wordsmithing things that are in here from me. And so my personal opinion is that if my wording suggestions are accepted, then it's ready for a vote. And you can see there's one topic that we haven't talked about yet. So I'm going to flip to their view here. I just want to see, you can see the number of my comments here. It's not large, and most of them are trivial wordsmith changes. So let's go to the actual view here. So this is a document that I'm going to come back to in just a second here. And so he's put in for a responsibility of a mentor to be familiar with and make sure maintainers are aware of its recommendations, right? So there's another responsibility for maintainers to, like promote D&I in the projects by making sure people are familiar with the policies that is in the other document here, assuming that it gets approved. Then it would become a responsibility of a mentor. This is a topic that we have, to my recollection, we've not discussed in any TAC meeting. And so Dan proposes this one. So this is, let me just expand here so you can see what this one is about. He's proposed this as a requirement for incubation stage. Okay, so remember the stages are sandbox, then incubation, then graduation. And so all of our projects today are in sandbox except for Open Enclave, which is an incubation. So this would be a requirement that retroactively we'd have to confirm that that Open Enclave has already met or will meet, imminently. And that any other project that's ready to move to incubation, whether it's NRX or whatever else, this is a requirement that we would evaluate at the time that they say we think it's ready for incubation. So he proposes demonstrate that the project is invested in growing in a DNI community. Resources and recommendations are available at and through your mentor. So in other words, how is it that they are invested in growing? So for example, do they have, how are they meeting what's in the other document, right? Do they already have, code of conduct, et cetera, things in place according to the document up here that we haven't looked at yet? Okay. So that one we have not discussed whether anything should be a requirement for incubation stage. And so that's the biggest thing that he's proposing that's sort of different from anything else we've discussed. And so would love to see people's opinions on that, or whether we should omit this one because we haven't had enough discussion. In other words, whether we're ready for a vote or not depends on potentially your opinion on this one. Because I think everything up in this one, other than whether it's a recommendation or a resource, then we've already discussed it. But this one down here, we have not actually discussed it yet, to my knowledge, this one, as to whether it should be a requirement to demonstrate that you're invested in growing a DNI community. Any initial thoughts on this, given that we haven't, I jumped onto this because most of you have been in the discussion. We had DNI that Dan has led before. And so taking on faith for a minute that the policies up above match what we discussed before, this principle that says, should stuff be a requirement for moving to incubation, is that the right thing? Or should it be earlier or later? Or is it too strong, too weak, or just right in like a Goldilocks sense? So any opinions on requirements for incubation phase?
Seems appropriate to me. I don't have anything against.
Okay. If I only hear statements of seems okay to me, then that's saying it, because we're not calling for the vote on the call here. At least not unless everybody says, oh yeah, well, it's obvious we should call for a vote. But otherwise, I'm just going to do that over email unless somebody says, oh no, I want to discuss that more. And then I will hold off and not call the vote yet, which is kind of my purpose in this discussion here, is to say, are we ready to call for a vote? Subject to like words being accepted. So we'll get to that. So let me just go into display the rich diff view here. Oh, you can't see my comments in this one. Since it's short enough, I'll leave it in this view. Okay, so here's Dan's write-up. This is that same slide at the beginning of every meeting. So just copy the text into there. Nothing controversial there. So this one is what I mentioned is not technically correct. So this one, the project proposal template specifies that a project must have a code of conduct to be submitted to the confidential computing consortium. Okay, this statement is not quite true because we've had a bunch of submissions that have been submitted that fill in that says we don't have one yet. And so we said, okay, well, here's the template. You can create one, but it didn't stop them from submitting it. So I'm saying this notion that says you got to have one before you fill out the submission application, it is not backed up by historical precedent so far. And so I proposed changing that one to be should have a code of conduct to be accepted by, because it's really a part of the TAC discussion vote. Do we want to accept stuff? Do we want to say create the code of conduct before we vote on it, or what? That's something we get to decide on a case-to-case basis. So I thought that this weakening to say should and to be accepted by, not to be submitted by, actually did reflect current, what's actually happened in the past. Whether we want to be stronger in the future, I at least wanted to change to be something that is perhaps non-controversial because we've already done it this way. So that was my reason for the change here. If you look at the template, it says, specify if you have what's your code of conduct. So let's go ahead and switch to that so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me open up another tab. So the submission template is here. And what it says right now, if we look for conduct, okay, here, technical information. And so you can see all these things like issue tracker URL, source controlled URL, project code of conduct URL. Okay. So it's ambiguous as to whether you are required to have one, or if the filling in the answer of none is here, because only the word recommend is here, right? Now, of course, this phrase over here, if the code of conduct is not bulleted, not explain why, you could argue that that phrasing implies that you have to have one, right? So that's why it's a little bit ambiguous. But in previous submissions that we've had, they might say issue tracker URL, yet none yet, we're creating one. Or a code of conduct URL, none yet, we're creating one, or something like that. And so they didn't already have one by the time they submitted it. And so that's why you can see this phrasing right now is a little bit ambiguous. So I would propose that we weaken it to this phrase here. This is, we can make it be a policy to accept it, but it's not a requirement in order to submit it. You could be doing that in parallel or something, was my proposal here.
Seems sensible.
Okay, thank you for speaking up. Always good to know that I'm not talking in a dead air. People are paying attention, so you get a star. Here's the next one. The template specifies additional community characteristics that project must demonstrate for each stage. And some of them are in the recommended category in the project progression policy. And so I dropped this into be a should, because there are some requirements and some recommendations. And since this one is vague and it points to that for the official one, I thought dropping this into a should was a little more precise. And then here's the new thing that he's referring to. Each project is expected to develop an inclusive and diverse community. The means and specific goals may vary by project. So in other words, there's no prescribed thing that you have to do, other than you have to have some way of explaining what it is that you're doing, right? The project's mentor is one resource available. A short list of additional resources recommendations are provided in this document as an aid to projects. Projects are welcome to utilize additional resources to fit. Okay. So now we get into actual recommendations. Maintainers are recommended to take the, okay, so we talked about this in the last meeting that says, here's the like training that is appropriate for maintainers. And you can see is recommended is the current phrasing, not required, but recommended to say that maintainers take that course. And so if you have a project that says, our policy is that all maintainers are expected to take this course, then you can say that you're doing something to develop an inclusive and diverse community. So one way that you might answer that question to get to the incubation stage to say, you know, we have policies like all maintainers are supposed to take this course, and anybody that's going to give a presentation at, you know, open source summit or lead a panel or whatever else is expected to take this course here. So that'd be an example of something that would meet that criteria. Because you have something to say that you're using to develop an inclusive and diverse community. Now you could be doing more than that if you have other policies too, but these are the two things that we've talked about that are recommendations from the CCC. There could be other things in the future, but those are the only two that are recommendations that we've discussed so far is those two. This one is a best practice. So it's not phrased as a recommended to have one, because we don't have like an LF1 to point to. That's the discussion that Stefano was summarizing before. But to say there's a best practice is to, like, you know, have inclusive writing style guides, but it's not a requirement yet because we don't have good resources for them other than these three, which are not CCC resources. So that was kind of, you know, maybe a potential future improvement. So that's what it says right now. Okay. So you're expected to develop one, and there's only two recommendations right now, which is one, again, not requirements, but recommendations, one for maintainers and one for speakers. And this is about what projects should have as their own policies, right? So we recommend that projects have policies that have these two recommendations in them would be the way to summarize what this is about. So that's the pull request right now. So again, the mentor's job is to make sure the project is familiar with the above recommendations so that the projects can make their own decisions to what their own policies are, right? As you can see, the means and specific goals are allowed to vary by project. That's fine, right? And the only thing that else is just that one thing that's the proposal here that saying how you answer that question is what is your policy? is now part of the review for becoming an incubation stage project. All right, so that's kind of my full summary of if Dan was here. Oh, there's one last thing here. Okay. He deleted under graduation stage. What we currently say is that you have to adopt the code of conduct under graduation stage. Now, some background here. Everything for graduation stage has not been ratified by the CCC or the TAC, okay? It is in the document, but it's never been ratified, okay? The progression policy was adopted at the inaugural meeting of the TAC, which was October 2019. And everything prior to graduation stage was approved as official. Everything from graduation stage downwards, which is graduation and I don't know if it's emeritus or whatever the other one is called, is in here for reference, but never ratified. So it's a placeholder for things because we've never actually voted on these things. And that was because we were going to run out of time and we had nothing being proposed for graduation stage. And we knew people had issues with things that were in the text of graduation stage that we did not have time to discuss. And so we split the vote into two pieces. We said, we're going to vote on everything down to, but not including graduation stage and below. And we ratified that, and we've never called for a vote, and we never had the discussion on the other ones because we've always been able to push it off to later until we actually had some project that was in, say, incubation stage. And what was even in stages past that tended to be much less interesting. Okay. So with that as the prefix that says we can make any changes we want here because anything in here was never agreed to as stated in the first place. You can see adopting a code of conduct was way down here, okay? And so we never had this discussion of whether, say, code of conduct was required down here because people had already disagreed with this with some of the points down in here before. So he's proposed removing it from here, okay? Because it's already covered up above in the stuff that I was mentioning about, must or should before. So that's why he was, in case you were confused about that it was listed as a requirement for graduation. I just wanted to provide that full background since probably the majority of the people on the call came into the CCC after October of 2019. So let's see, I think there was, this one. Okay, so here, you can see he had it as kind of a requirement to be submitted. And my comment here was rather than deleting it from the graduation stage, we should move it to have a requirement to have one to an earlier stage. And so we can say, is it a requirement for sandbox, which would have been maybe Dan's impression? Is it a requirement only for incubation, which I think should certainly be the case. And so we can have a discussion that says, okay, is a code of conduct mandatory for acceptance as a sandbox project or not? Right now, since we haven't actually called for that as a vote, and you can see Dan had a different impression than historical precedent. I think we've actually, I don't know if we've actually asked everything to actually have a code of conduct, but I think it might be a good idea for us to say that it is a requirement for sandbox. But I want to ask you all if you think having an official code of conduct that's stated and linked from your project should be a requirement for all sandbox projects, or whether we need to be more lax on that. I'm open to be swayed right now, but what do others think on that? I think I know what Dan would say, but anybody else here, so.
I think it would be better to have it
as a requirement for sandbox. Yeah, as okay. Anybody disagree with that? Because part of Dan's pull request is to clean that, make there be clarity there. So I'm looking for where that first one was that. It was in this one here. Okay, if I go to 17 of the policies. Okay. Okay, yeah, here. It must have to be submitted to, okay, because then this should may become a must, and I could leave that one and only change this to be accepted by, right? That's really what I'm asking here is, should we make this be a project must have a code of conduct to be accepted by, and then it's a requirement for sandbox? I can tell you that Dan would vote yes on that one from Intel, based on his pull request right here being his actual vote. So
yeah, we do the same.
yeah, okay, you support that too? Okay, then.
Yeah, it seems reasonable.
Okay, so hearing from all the voting members, I'm going to change this back to his must now that we've had that as a discussion. And so I'm only proposing now submitted to accepted by, right? That is something that we evaluate, but they could generate the submission while they're doing that. So, okay. So other than that, are people okay if I call for a vote as soon as this and this word gets committed? Meaning I'm going to confirm with Dan that he agrees with these two. And then my proposal is as soon as Dan commits those two right there, then I would post this in as an email vote. Any objections from those on the call?
Cool, works for me.
No objection.
Okay, cool. Well, my question is not just for the voting members, right? Because the voting members cast the vote, but everything else is basically a consensus of people. So everybody, general members or visitors or whatever, your feedback is wanted on these things too. If you agree, if you disagree or have something you want else change, and the voting members will make that happen. But really, we want the stuff to be a consensus among the full TAC, not just the voting members. So, okay, great. Then I will not call for that vote immediately. I will follow up with that and then start the vote on that one, probably in a separate email. So, all right, so then let's go to our last topic, given that we've already covered any other business from Ben now. All right, so our last topic is the establishing common terminology. So history on this one. I think there was a number of previous discussions. Ava held the pen first, and then Ava needed to hand off the pen to other people. And so we had myself and Eric, and I forget who else took action items. Looks like I see Mark was a year ago. So I think it was, and Mike. All right. So I did a pass based on previous, we had a bunch of comments in here before, which I've then marked as resolved or accepted or whatever. And then all of the changes here, I think, unless Eric, you added any changes as opposed to comments, I think all the green changes are from me trying to address past comments. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't actually have any text change, maybe just one word. I think all of mine was just trying to understand that we had the right scope and add some questions.
Yeah, I think there's one or two that I read your things and I would now want to make a text change or two. So just to refresh people's memory here. This is proposing a set of terms that, and so this is the one that there's comments on that I've now been convinced to change now that I've seen a comment or two from people from what I have in green. What this is, if you call something a confidential VM or you use the term confidential process, or what's the term that we use for an enclave type of construct, because since some projects use enclave and some use keep for the process level and so on. So what's a good generic term? And so here, this is about a number of terms that are confidential, fill in the blank. And so we define a couple of those is the point of this. And so just to walk through what this one currently says, and I'll mention what the potential changes are to point number 3. Let me see if I can increase the font size here somehow. I don't know how to zoom better in Google Docs. Is there a way to, I guess I can go full screen is probably the best I can do. All right. Sorry if you have to squint here. All right. So originally the term in last year's write-up was confidential application, which the feedback was that one is kind of a misnomer. I think Mike had said there's no such thing. I don't know if you can see that right now. I had some issues with that. So this is the proposed replacement, because the point is the entire application in this model doesn't run inside the TEE. The common theme for these confidential fill in the blank, the fill in the blank runs entirely inside of a TEE and may communicate with things outside the TEE or have some external things, but everything in the library is part of the TCB, right? The entire process is part of the TCB. The entire container is part of the TCB. The entire VM is part of the TCB. It's not only part of it, right? Where like in the enclave model, the application is not entirely in the TCB. It has 2 components, and that's why the term here didn't quite match the definition. And so confidential library is the current proposed term for a piece of an application, whether you call that an enclave, like in the SGX case, or whether you call it a process, a library level, keep, because, in NARCs, it has two different levels that both two different terms here would apply to two different ways of using NARCs. So a library, such as an enclave that's executed inside of a TE and is used by an application outside the TE, right? And so confidential library, confidential process, if you can run the entire binary inside there. So like in a trust zone world, a trusted application that runs in secure world could potentially be a confidential process, right? Because it's not part of the rich application process. It really is a separate process in that sense, with a separate lifetime. Confidential container, I'll come back to, and then confidential VM as a term when the entire VM runs inside the DE, like in a AMD, SEV, SNP example, right? So confidential container is the one that there's been additional follow-up on right now, and it has to do with this phrase here, the OCI compatible. Okay. And so you can see, Eric and people having opinions. So I'll tell you where I'm at right now. So when I wrote this, right, the intent was to say a confidential container is a container that runs in a TEE. Now in Ava's original text, it said OCI compatible container, okay, which is a, out of all possible definitions of container, it's a specific definition of container, right? And so the observation is that using a generic word over here and using a more specific term over here, the granularity mismatches, okay? So you could say confidential OCI compatible container and it would be consistent. Or you could say confidential container in a generic sense and drop it from here. And so I might, for example, add OCI compatible container up here, or we could drop it from down here. But the point was the granularity of terms don't match between a generic term and a precise term down here. So that, Eric, did you want to say anything more about your comment on, so you had one on this whole section, so.
Yeah, finishing off there, I almost wrote up something just like you're talking about. I'm okay with either. I did a whole look at what OCI meant, and I'm like, well, yeah. So I think with your change, I have no problem with OCI. In terms of other comments, there's a higher level comment. And the higher level comment is when you were doing your intro for these terms, quite a few times you use TCB and trusted computing base, and there is a common thread of what a TCB is across the definitions here. Is it worth talking about what a TCB is to talk about what the commonality is across these terms, or is it somewhere else defined?
I don't think it's somewhere else defined, other than I think the technical white paper does talk about trusted computing base. That's from memory. I think Mike Purcell had some text that he was the author of that we agreed on that I think shows up in there, but I have to look back. What this one does right now is it currently uses the term runs inside a hardware-based TE. So although I said in the TCB voiceover, I think the precise term it tries to use right now is performing computation inside, performing computation in a hardware-based trust execution environment, which is our definition of confidential computing. And so the definition here, right here, performing computation, this.
Yeah. So the thing is that a trusted computing base is de facto what's running there. Makes people think that I better understand my trusted computing base. So the question I was trying to highlight in my first comment was pointing out that trusted computing base was defined in the upcoming TCG reference on attestation framework requirements, as well as shielded location. So if we ever wanted to map to that, or have people start thinking about that, I better understand everything in my TCB. Having the term TCB starts people thinking about what libraries of code might be in each one of these things. I know it's not what you're wanting to hear because the terminology, this is accurate, but at some point we have to map the terminology to code, and that is not a bad thing to do.
So maybe, Eric, so the original TCB definition is the orange book or the blue book, right? This is 1985 DoD document. And the way they say it, it's basically the boundary within which you can prove trustworthiness or security, right? This is where the attestation comes in. So maybe just, citing that DoD document from 85 is sufficient when we say TCP.
Fine. But again, you could decide and put something in here in a confidential container and not be ever vetted for trustworthy, and we don't have any hints that there's the applications inside that have some representation of what should be trustworthy.
Okay. Understood. Yeah.
So chair hat off, personal hat, maybe Microsoft voting TAC rep hat on for just a second here. So pretend I'm not the chair for my following comment. My personal preference is that the discussion of trusted computing base would be in the aforementioned white paper that you two are tasked with helping to create the structure from.
Which two? Who two?
Thomas
H. and Eric V.
The point is that I'm happy to, as you remember, I tried to make this a dependent document. Can we do it out of this? Yes, we can do it. Define it there.
I say my personal preference, right? Not trying to summarize what consensus is. My personal preference is to have the definitions here be with respect to performing computation in a hardware-based trusted execution environment without mentioning the term trusted computing base, and leave the discussion of trusted computing base to that other document. That is my personal preference. All right, I'm going to put my moderator hat back on. Please continue with your point of view, and let's see what we can get as a consensus. So,
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, good. It would be good if somebody, maybe this group, provides like a real good definition, because if it is a good definition, it's going to make it into like the NIST, guidelines document somewhere along the line.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it's here, because I think it's a thread which goes through all of the terms defined.
Yeah. Hearing a quick pause, I'm just going to scroll down and comment here. Everything in red here and below is old stuff. So this part right here is Mike Purcell, October 2020. So this was all the top part was written by Ava, summarized first, and then Mike wrote an alternative thing that's down here. My personal opinion, as I mentioned here, is that Mike's feedback here is now incorporated into the green text, and so I don't consider this part of the current proposal, but since Mike's not here, I can't speak for him, so I did not touch it. And then somewhere down here, Ava had a original proposal to establish a working group, which there's some pushback on that says we don't think we need a working group, it's just something the TAC does, and so I didn't touch this right here. So now the proposal actually, at least in my opinion, after doing a pass from it, is the proposal ends here right now, is this right here is the bottom of the document, everything else is an appendix. Yeah, just like when we were creating the white paper, we move everything else to an appendix that was, old text things. And so I just want to explain that I'm not going to cover anything down below unless, Mike or Ava come back and say we want to revisit those topics. So otherwise, the main proposal is these terms here.
I totally am in line with that.
Okay, then with that, I'm just going to add another appendix here. Okay. All right, so any opinions on what to do with this term right now? Should we drop OCI compatible? Should we add both terms or whatever? You can see OCI is the thing that explains what's, so for example, Docker is OCI compliant. So the term, when Docker says container, it means OCI container, but there's other definitions of container out there that aren't Docker. So, I mean, they aren't OCI compatible, right? So since these are just, examples, if you say run an OCI compatible container in there, then it's confidential. So it would certainly be precise if we did this, but typically in normal, conference and things, when people say container unqualified, they often mean Docker. They don't specifically say OCI container. That's kind of, OCI compliant. That's kind of implied that if you just say container, it kind of means that. And that's why the old definition was there. It says confidential container means OCI compatible, because that's what most people mean. But I'm not sure. So
I don't think it hurts to get more generic, because the only time it'll matter, if somebody really wanted to get OCI in their specification, they can say it's a confidential container of OCI compatibility.
yeah.
So I mean, they have the ability to get more specific. It's very hard to get more general.
Yeah, because we could certainly delete this and just say a container that is executed inside. So all of these is really, confidential X answer, and X that is executed inside a hardware-based TE. Oh, there's one missing from right there. Hardware-based TE. Okay. The intent is all of those should be expanded to match what's in our definition. So sometimes there's an additional elaboration, like here it says an enclave is an example of something in that category, or a trusted application in the trust zone sense, an example in this category. And we could have other EGs in here, but otherwise the standard definition would be a fill in the blank, whatever that word is, that is executed inside a hardware-based TE. Like here's an additional elaboration that says a library has to have some application outside of it because it's not an executable. You got to have some process. So some of these have elaborations, but there's a core definition. A blah that is executed inside a hardware-based DE. And there could be other terms that people want, but these are the most common levels that we've seen. If enclaves, I think, if I remember right, NARCs, Lily, I think has both confidential library and confidential process, if I'm remembering right. Now you guys have two different levels of keep.
So I still haven't read this document, but yes, I think because we, or I mean, not we now because I'm not involved, but they have the SGX based and the SEV based. So it's the two different types.
Yeah. And the SEV based, I'm asking you because you have the technical knowledge, right? Even if you're not representing them on the call, but in the SEV based one, it's running as a process, or what's the right way to think about the other model? You guys have them labeled.
SEV would be the confidential VM, and then SGX would be the confidential process. I think just looking at this very quickly.
SGX would be.
Or sorry, that would be it could be the library. Yeah, because it's splitting the application into the two parts.
Right. So I think it's, I don't know if there's any project right now that fits into this category right here, but certainly, trust zone TAs do follow this model, and things like Open Enclave, when you use them with trust zone, it actually takes a trusted application and it exposes it to the application as if it was an enclave, meaning it uses these types of APIs, even though it's actually sitting over as a separate trusted process in the secure world. So technically I could say that Open Enclave supports these two because it supports, OPT-based TAs on ARM, and NARC supports 2 and I think you said 2 and 4, right?
That sounds right.
Okay, and there's other vendors and things that have either 3 or 4. I think the talk on I think is it Kata containers that we'll hear from next TAC, I think is on point number 3. So okay, let's see, Eric, are there any other comments from you that you wanted to talk about that we haven't already covered? Because I know you did a bunch of comments in here.
I think those are the main ones. I think the one that's still outstanding is the linkage of code running to where the code is running. The terminology right now says kind of what is running, but without saying where it's running. So I still believe that we have to somehow tie trusted computing.
Can you point me to a particular sentence just so I can scroll to your right comment here? Where are you talking about?
It's embedded in the top and middle and the very one at the bottom. So it's actually in there 3 times in my comments.
Is it? I
show more for this. Each time you hit show more, it'll be in there.
Okay. Okay.
The first one talks about show more where
I clicked show more and it didn't show more.
It did, and it popped away. So for whatever reason.
Okay, here it is.
That's one of them, but there's one.
Yeah, because for me, the intent was where it's running is very explicit, and inside a hardware-based TE is saying where it's running. So I'm trying to find where You're saying it
Well,
can be-
yeah, but the confidential VM or confidential container isn't confidential unless you've validated your TCB. So I do think that you should be able to expose that it's just not running in there, which gets you there. It has to be the evaluation of the libraries. And that's the point that these terms don't really get to the point without verifying the contents.
Ah, okay. I think I get your point now. Let me repeat back what I think your point is, because I think it's if I'm understanding you right, then I agree with you. We've talked about the protection of data in use, okay? And then we elaborated on that by saying protection of data in use involves those three components here, right? Data integrity, data confidentiality, and code integrity, okay? You're saying that by running inside there isn't sufficient. You also have to assert that you're providing those three capabilities.
Yes.
That's your point, right? Now,
yeah.
Going back to my personal hat, not moderator, my personal opinion is we can do that without using the word trusted computing base. But I agree with you that we should make sure it's clear that you have to be able to provide those three things, right? In order to be called, confidence, right? So it's, confidential library. You got to run inside there in a way that provides data integrity, data confidentiality, and code integrity. And so that's the phrasing that may not be clear down here that you're trying to point out.
Is the reason you're trying to stay away from TCB because it's well known and we can reference it?
It's partly because of my lack of knowledge about a particular question, which I can ask. But again, this is me personally, so if you don't mind me taking up a second, because I've heard. I've not read the document that you mentioned, and so it's probably mentioned in there, but I've heard in different people's discussions, two different interpretations of TCB, right? And hopefully you're going to tell me that one of them is right and one of them is wrong, okay? One of them is the TCB is components that run, is a subset of the components that run on the box. And in another definition, the TCB includes things like the tools that you use to provision it that are currently running off of the box. All of that is your trusted computing base. So whether the base is something that's on the device or the base is the stuff that's on the device plus the stuff that you have to trust in order to provision the device, okay, which is not on the box, which one is your TCB?
I have just been using the what's on the box. So my term has always been what's on the box because that's what's running, and you still have to trust to get it there. You still got to trust to be able to prove that it is what it is. But in terms of running the process, I've seen it that way. In fact, this is the last comment I had, or the comment that I have that was the unit I care about most is a full set of code that needs to be trusted, exposed by an API, which is first serviced either inside or outside the TEE. So I actually have that in one of my comments. It's the one as to an alternative set of primitives. I think it's a little further down. But my point was that you really have to service some API inside or outside the TEE, and the code will be partially in, partially out. Yes.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that technically, but I was trying to avoid that because I didn't want to have to insert text to explain which meeting that we had. But if everybody else does, I would be okay with that. But I'm saying that's why I had a little aversion to it, because I don't, I've seen people use or misuse, whichever your opinion is, the term in both senses. So.
Yeah, I think it's kind of not controversial, but I think people have different definitions of it. And I don't know if Mike Bursell has had a chance to weigh in on it, but a lot of my understanding comes from working with him, and it sort of seemed like a more expansive definition of anything in the system as it's working, whether it's on the box or not, that is critical to security, we would call in the TCB. So he's not on the call right now, but Mike definitely knows a lot about this topic as well.
So Eric, that's why that doesn't surprise me. Thank you, Lily. That's kind of why I was trying to avoid that term, because the particular discussion of which definition of TCP is not essential to the technical point here. What is just stating stuff without using that term. That's, the meaning that's the stuff that's on the box is what we're talking about here.
Or on device elements of the TCB. So if you want to use
exactly.
that's fine.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't put that into here, just to answer your question here. But
all right. whether we use TCB or something else, the idea that there is a point in the API inside the protected environment or outside, I think that few people know that, and we had some discussions already today on that. So I think it's an essential part of the terminology, and I'm hoping that we can find a way to talk about where the first bit of trusted code exists and how it applies across these terms. I think that would make this a more meaningful document.
Okay, if you have suggestions, please please supply text, whether it's in this document or whether it's in a companion document, the one that we were talking about earlier about the host to guest model and framing it as, TCB discussion. That's fine. I would be fine having those be different documents. If you want to have them be separate sections in the same document, that's okay too. But here, this was an attempt to say, can we get TAC consensus on, actually, we can probably delete that one right now because this is just saying out in the industry, people have used that. It's not in the list down here. It says, can we at least say, hey, we're going to have some common terminology we're going to use within the TAC and in future CCC white papers that uses this style of language here. So. All right, anybody else have comments on these they want to bring up? Otherwise, we will move on and wrap up. Thanks, Eric, for helping make a pass through this, and looking forward to future contributions here in terms of the TCB discussion. So.
Okay.
All right. All right, so this takes us to the end. Was there any other business people wanted to bring up before we end the call? Any other topics? I was like, things for next meeting we have is we'll come back to the outreachy discussion next time. I'm expecting we'll have more on the more continuation of the common terminology discussion next time. Don't know if there's any other major topics we'll be ready for next time. We have the Kata containers talk next time, so we should have a bunch of stuff next time. So with that, unless anybody else has anything else, we'll see you in 2 weeks on September 9.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, all.